his jacket. On my chair. The jacket had been there for 3 days before I allowed myself to touch it. It hung over the back of the wooden chair near the window, exactly where he had tossed it without looking, like he always did. The late afternoon light poured in through the thin curtains and settled gently on the worn denim, illuminating the frayed collar and the faint white dust along the shoulders. It looked as if it were waiting for him to come back and slip into it. But the house had been too quiet for too long. I stood in the kitchen doorway, staring at it like it might disappear if I blinked. The chair creaked slightly when the wind pressed against the glass. For a moment, I imagined it was him shifting his weight, clearing his throat, about to call my name in that soft, distracted way he had. Lena. I closed my eyes. The silence pressed in harder. 3 days ago, he had left in a rush. He'd been searching for his car keys, muttering under his breath, running a hand through his hair. I had been standing right there, leaning against the counter, watching him unravel over something so small. "They're always right where you leave them," I had said. He'd shot me a look. Not angry, not exactly. Just tired. So tired. "I know," he'd replied. "I know." He found the keys in his jacket pocket. He laughed once, sharp and humorless. Then he shrugged out of the jacket and tossed it over the chair. "I don't need this. It's warm enough." He hesitated before stepping toward the door. His hand hovered over the knob like he had something left to say. Something important. I remember the way his shoulders rose with a breath he never released. "Don't wait up," he said instead. The door closed. That was the last sound of him I ever heard. I walked slowly toward the chair now, my bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. Each step felt like stepping into deeper water. My chest tightened with a familiar ache, one that had settled behind my ribs and refused to loosen. I reached out. My fingers brushed the sleeve. It was still soft. Still him. I brought it to my face before I could stop myself, pressing my nose against the fabric. The scent was fading, but it was there. Cedar soap, faint tobacco, and something warm that belonged only to him. My knees weakened. "How could you leave it?" I whispered to the empty room. I sank into the chair and pulled the jacket into my lap. It swallowed my hands. It felt heavier than it should have. They told me it was instant. That he didn't suffer. That the other driver didn't see the red light. That sometimes these things just happen. I hated that phrase. Sometimes these things just happen. As if love can be erased by an accident report. As if a person can dissolve into paperwork and condolences, and a folded flag handed to someone else's shaking hands. I hadn't even gone to the hospital in time. They had called, but by the time I arrived, he was already gone. A nurse with kind eyes and trembling lips led me into a small white room and asked me to sit down. I didn't sit. I remember staring at her mouth while she spoke. But the words drifted past me like smoke. I kept waiting for the punchline. For someone to step out and say it was a mistake. For him to walk in with that sheepish smile and say, "You should have seen your face." But there was no smile. Only a silver ring placed into my palm and the quiet, devastating finality of it all. Now the ring sat on the kitchen counter beside the sink. I hadn't been able to move it. It felt like moving it would mean accepting something permanent. The jacket shifted in my grip as I exhaled shakily. "You forgot this?" I said aloud, my voice cracking. "You're always forgetting something." The house didn't answer. I stood and slipped the jacket over my shoulders. It hung too large on me, the sleeves covering half my hands. I wrapped my arms around myself and walked to the bedroom. His side of the bed was still unmade. The indentation of his body had faded, but I could still see it if I looked closely enough. I lay down on top of the covers, curling toward where he used to sleep. The ceiling fan turned slowly above me. "You said don't wait up," I murmured. "I didn't. I swear I didn't." The guilt came in waves. What if I had insisted he wear the jacket? What if I had asked him to stay? What if I had told him I loved him one more time before he left instead of letting the moment pass in quiet familiarity? We had said it that morning, over burnt toast and weak coffee. But it wasn't the same. It's never the same as the last time. Tears slid silently into my hair. I didn't sob. The crying had grown quiet over the past 3 days. Exhausted, like my body didn't have the strength for dramatic grief anymore. Instead, there was a hollow place inside me, expanding slowly. My phone buzzed from the nightstand. I didn't look at it. People had been calling constantly. His mother, my sister, friends I hadn't spoken to in years. They all said the same things. "He's in a better place. You're strong. Let me know if you need anything." I needed him, but no one could bring that. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the room. The jacket's cuff brushed against my cheek as I shifted. I closed my eyes and imagined his arm there instead, heavy and warm. "I'm still here," I whispered into the fabric. The words felt foolish. Small. Night crept in slowly, painting the walls in blue, gray. I didn't turn on the lights. I wanted the darkness. It felt more honest. I must have drifted into a shallow, uneasy sleep, because the next thing I knew, the room was completely dark and cold. I woke with my heart pounding. For a split second, I thought I heard the front door open. I held my breath. There it was again, a faint creak. Hope is cruel. I sat up quickly, the jacket sliding from my shoulders. "Daniel," I called, my voice fragile. Silence answered. I got out of bed and walked down the hallway, each step echoing too loudly. The living room stood empty. The front door remained closed and locked. The wind had picked up outside. I leaned my forehead against the wood and let out a broken laugh. "You're not coming back," I said softly. The truth tasted bitter. I turned around slowly. And that's when I saw it. The chair by the window was empty. My breath caught in my throat. The jacket was no longer there. My breath caught in my throat. The jacket was no longer there. For a moment, I thought I was still dreaming. That thin, fragile place between sleep and waking where impossible things slide easily into the room and sit beside you like old friends. I blinked once. Twice. The chair remained bare. The wood looked naked without it, the backrest exposed to the dim blue light of the street lamp outside. The curtains shifted gently in the wind, brushing against the window like fingertips. "No," I whispered. My eyes moved slowly across the living room, the couch, the coffee table, the small bookshelf against the wall. Everything stood in its place, unchanged. Except the jacket. I stepped forward carefully, as if approaching something dangerous. My pulse thudded loudly in my ears, drowning out the wind. Maybe I moved it. Maybe in my asleep grief, I had carried it somewhere else and forgotten. Grief had been stealing pieces of my memory lately. I would walk into a room and forget why. I would pick up my phone and stare at it without knowing who I meant to call. But I remembered putting it back on the chair. I remembered smoothing the sleeve with my hand. I reached the chair and touched the wood where it had hung. Cold. The house felt colder too. Colder than it had any right to be in late spring. Daniel. I called again, softer this time. Not because I believed he would answer, but because the silence was starting to feel alive. Nothing. I swallowed hard and turned toward the bedroom. Maybe I had left it there after all. Maybe this was my mind playing tricks on me. The hallway stretched longer than usual, shadows pooling along the baseboards. I flipped on the light. It flickered once before settling into a dull glow. The bedroom door stood slightly open. I didn't remember leaving it that way. A thin thread of unease crept down my spine. "You're exhausted," I told myself. "You haven't slept properly in days." I pushed the door open. The room was empty. The bed unmade. The pillow on his side slightly dented, from where I had curled against it earlier. The window cracked open just a sliver. And there, on the edge of the mattress, the jacket. Folded. Neatly. My knees nearly gave out beneath me. I stared at it, unable to breathe. The sleeves were tucked carefully underneath, the collar smoothed flat. Daniel had never folded his jacket in his life. He would drape it over chairs, toss it onto couches, drop it on the floor, if he was distracted enough. But this looked deliberate. I stepped closer, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. My fingertips hovered above the fabric before finally making contact. It was warm. Not warm like it had been against my body earlier. Warm like it had just been worn. A strangled sound escaped my throat. I snatched my hand back as if burned. "This isn't real," I said, shaking my head. "This isn't real." The tears blurred my vision. My chest tightened painfully, each breath shallow and sharp. Grief does strange things, they say. It can make you hear footsteps in empty halls. It can make you see faces in crowds that aren't there. but it cannot fold jackets. I reached for it again, slower this time. My hands trembled as I lifted it. The warmth seeped into my palms, undeniable. I pressed it to my chest. "Stop," I whispered, though I didn't know who I was speaking to. Myself. The air. Him. A memory surfaced suddenly. Daniel standing at the foot of this very bed 2 weeks ago, holding the jacket in one hand. "You know," he had said casually, "if anything ever happens to me, don't keep my stuff like a shrine." I had laughed, tossing a pillow at him. "You're not going anywhere." "I mean it," he insisted, smiling but with something serious behind his eyes. "Don't let objects become ghosts." "You're being dramatic." "Maybe." He had shrugged, then thrown the jacket over the chair again. "Just promise." I never promised. Now the words echoed in the room. Don't let objects become ghosts. My grip tightened on the fabric. "You don't get to tell me what to keep." I muttered through tears. "You don't get to leave, and then tell me how to survive it." The air felt thick, heavy against my lungs. I backed up slowly until the edge of the bed hit the back of my knees. I sank down, still clutching the jacket. The warmth began to fade. Panic flared in my chest. I pressed it harder against me, as if I could trap whatever impossible heat remained. "Please?" I breathed. The room stayed still. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time had lost its shape. Eventually, the jacket cooled completely, returning to nothing more than denim and stitching and memory. My hands fell limp in my lap. I laughed then. A broken, hysterical sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. Of course it wasn't warm. Of course it wasn't moved by unseen hands. I was unraveling. Sleep deprivation. Shock. Trauma. That's what this was. I laid the jacket back down on the bed, unfolding it carelessly this time. Let it be messy. Let it be ordinary. "I'm not losing my mind," I whispered to the empty room. But the words didn't convince me. I stood and walked to the window, pushing it closed. The wind outside had grown louder, howling softly through the trees. The branches scraped against the siding, creating faint, irregular sounds. Sounds that could be mistaken for footsteps. I turned off the bedroom light and stepped back into the hallway. As I passed the bathroom, I froze. The mirror inside reflected the dim hall light. And for the briefest second, I thought I saw someone standing behind me. My breath hitched violently as I spun around. The hallway was empty. Completely empty. My pulse roared in my ears. "You're tired," I told myself firmly. "That's all. You're tired and grieving, and your brain is filling in spaces because it doesn't know how to handle absence." Absence. The word felt like a wound. I forced myself back into the living room. The chair by the window looked even more wrong now without the jacket. Like it was waiting for something to complete it. I stared at it for a long time. Then, slowly, I walked back to the bedroom, picked up the jacket, and returned to the living room. With deliberate hands, I draped it over the chair exactly the way he had left it 3 days ago. Crooked. Casual. Unfolded. There, I said softly. That's where you put it. I stepped back. The room felt balanced again. Not whole. Never whole, but aligned with memory. Exhaustion weighed down my bones. I sank onto the couch, eyes fixed on the jacket as if it might move again. I miss you. I whispered into the dark. The wind quieted gradually. The house settled with soft creaks. My eyelids grew heavy despite my fear of sleep. I must have drifted off, because the next thing I remember was a faint sound pulling me from unconsciousness. Not the wind. Not the house settling. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Behind me. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Behind me. My eyes snapped open, but I didn't move. The sound was unmistakable. The soft press of weight against hardwood. A pause. Then another step. Close enough that I could almost feel the vibration beneath the couch. My breath thinned into something fragile and shallow. Don't turn around. I don't know why that thought came first. Maybe because turning around would make it real. Maybe because if I stayed still, if I pretended to be asleep, whatever was behind me might leave the way grief was supposed to, quietly, eventually, without demanding to be seen. Another step. Closer. My heart pounded so violently it felt visible beneath my ribs. Daniel? The name slipped out before I could stop it. The footsteps stopped. Silence expanded. Thick and humming. I swallowed hard and slowly pushed myself upright. Every muscle in my body trembled as I turned my head toward the empty space behind the couch. There was nothing there. Only the hallway, dim and still. Only shadows. Only the same unbearable emptiness that had lived in this house for 3 days. I stood abruptly, anger flaring sharp and sudden in my chest. No, I said, louder now. No, you don't get to do this. My voice cracked against the walls. I'm not crazy. I whispered. I'm not. But the sound had been real. I knew the difference between imagination and impact. I had lived with Daniel long enough to memorize the cadence of his walk. Slightly uneven from an old high school soccer injury. His right foot pressed heavier than his left. The steps I heard had carried that same rhythm. I walked slowly into the hallway, my bare feet silent against the floor. The air felt charged, electric against my skin. Say something, I murmured. If you're here, just say something. The house offered nothing in return. I reached the bedroom doorway and hesitated. The door was open, just as I'd left it. The bed unmade. The faint outline of his absence still etched into the mattress. And then, a shift of fabric behind me. I spun around so fast the room tilted. The jacket. It slid off the chair and fell to the floor. The sound was soft, ordinary. Denim against wood. But it echoed like thunder in my chest. I stared at it, my mind scrambling desperately for logic. The window. The wind. The balance of the chair. Something explainable. I walked back toward it slowly, my pulse roaring in my ears. You're not here. I whispered, though I didn't know whether I was convincing him or myself. I bent down and picked up the jacket. The fabric felt different now. Heavier. Not warm this time. Just weighted. As if soaked in something unseen. I clutched it tightly, pressing it against my chest again. My fingers curled into the collar where his neck used to rest. I don't know what you want, I said, my voice trembling. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. The silence that followed felt less empty now. It felt watchful. I squeezed my eyes shut. Do you want me to let you go? I asked. The question fractured something inside me, because I didn't want to. Letting go felt like betrayal. Like erasing him. Like agreeing that he could disappear without a fight. I can't. I breathed. I don't know how. A tear slipped down my face, soaking into the denim beneath my chin. And then, a hand. Not solid, not visible, but a sensation, a gentle pressure against my back. Warm, familiar. My entire body went rigid. It wasn't frightening. That was the worst part. It felt like him. Like the way he used to stand behind me in the kitchen, resting his palm between my shoulder blades while he leaned down to kiss my hair. The weight of it had always grounded me. The pressure lingered only for a second. Then it was gone. I gasped and stumbled forward, spinning around wildly. The hallway was empty. The air was still. But my skin burned where the touch had been. This isn't real, I said again, though my voice sounded small and unconvinced. Grief hallucinations. That's what I'd read about once. The brain, desperate for continuity, creates sensations. Sounds. Even touch. It's normal, the article had said. Common. A coping mechanism. I clung to that explanation like a lifeline. Yes, I whispered. That's all this is. My mind trying to survive. But the touch had felt intentional. Not random. Not imagined. I sank down onto the floor. The jacket pooled in my lap. My breathing came uneven and raw. Why now? I asked the emptiness. Why show up now? 3 days of silence. 3 days of hollow ache. And now, footsteps. Movement. Touch. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking time that felt distorted and fragile. Maybe this was the breaking point. Maybe this was what happens when sorrow grows too large to contain. It spills into the air and takes shape. I miss you, I said again, softer this time. That's all. I just miss you. The house creaked gently, almost like a sigh. My eyes drifted to the front door. An irrational thought formed slowly in my mind. What if he isn't trying to stay? What if he's trying to leave? The idea made my stomach twist painfully. Daniel had always hated unfinished things. Unspoken words. Lingering tension. And the last thing he said to me had been, "Don't wait up." What if that wasn't how he wanted to end? I looked down at the jacket in my lap. You don't want to be here? I whispered. Do you? The room felt suddenly colder. A slow dread crept into my chest. What if I was the one holding him here? What if the jacket wasn't a comfort but an anchor? My grip tightened reflexively. I can't just throw you away, I said, panic rising in my throat. I can't pretend you didn't exist. The front door rattled softly. Not from wind. From the handle turning. I froze. The sound came again. Slow. Deliberate. Someone was trying to open it. The sound came again. Slow. Deliberate. Someone was trying to open it. My entire body locked in place. The jacket slipped from my hands and pooled onto the floor. Forgotten. All I could hear was the faint metallic shift of the handle moving back and forth. Not violently. Not like someone forcing entry. Just testing it. My throat went dry. Who's there? I called out, but my voice barely carried past the living room. The handle stopped moving. Silence pressed against the door like a living thing. I stood carefully, my legs trembling beneath me. Every instinct told me not to approach it. To lock myself in the bedroom. To call someone. Anyone. But another part of me, the desperate, irrational, grieving part, already knew. I walked toward the door slowly. Each step heavy and deliberate. The hallway seemed longer than it had ever been before. The shadows stretched toward me, as if trying to pull me back. When I reached the door, I stood inches away from it, staring at the knob. It turned slightly again. My heart slammed painfully against my ribs. Daniel. I breathed. The name felt like both a prayer and a warning. Without giving myself time to think, I unlocked the door. The sound of the deadbolt sliding back echoed too loudly in the quiet house. I wrapped my fingers around the knob and pulled it open. Cold night air rushed inside, biting against my skin. The porch was empty. The street beyond it lay silent under the pale glow of streetlights. Trees swayed gently in the wind. No footsteps. No retreating figure. No car pulling away. No one. I stepped outside barefoot, ignoring the sting of the cold wood beneath my feet. I looked left. Right. Nothing. Hello. My voice cracked, carried away by the wind. There was no answer. The neighborhood slept undisturbed, unaware of the war unraveling inside my chest. I stepped back into the house slowly and closed the door behind me. Locked it again. The click of the bolt sliding into place felt final. Too final. I leaned my forehead against the wood, my breath fogging faintly in the cold air. I can't keep doing this, I whispered. My reflection stared back at me faintly in the small oval window of the door. My eyes looked hollow. Red, rimmed, haunted. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe grief was peeling away layers of reality until I couldn't tell what was solid anymore. I turned around slowly, and my breath vanished from my lungs. The jacket was no longer on the floor. It was hanging on the coat hook beside the door. Neatly. As if someone had just taken the time to place it there, before leaving. My pulse roared in my ears. I hadn't moved it. I knew I hadn't. It had fallen near the chair. I had left it there when I walked to the door. Now it hung inches from my face, waiting. My hand lifted slowly, trembling violently as I reached for it. The sleeve brushed against my fingers. Warm again. Not faintly warm. Not imagined. Warm like skin. A sob tore from my throat before I could stop it. "What do you want from me?" I cried, my voice breaking apart in the quiet house. "Tell me what you want." The air felt charged, heavy, pressing against my chest. The lights flickered. Just once. Then steadied. I pressed my forehead against the jacket. Tears soaking into the denim. My body shook uncontrollably. "I can't hold you here," I whispered. "If you're trying to leave, I don't know how to let you." A memory surfaced, uninvited. The hospital hallway. The nurse's soft voice. His mother collapsing into a chair. Me standing there, unable to cry, because I kept thinking he would hate this. He would hate the chaos. The unfinished words. The unfinished words. My breathing hitched. I had never told him to stay safe. Never told him to come back quickly. Never told him that the argument we had 2 nights before didn't matter. He left with "Don't wait up" between us. And I had let it be the last thing. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the empty air. "I'm sorry we fought. I'm sorry I rolled my eyes. I'm sorry I didn't hug you longer." The jacket seemed to grow heavier in my hands. As if listening. "I love you," I said. The words cracking open something deep inside me. I love you more than my pride. More than stupid arguments. More than anything. The house was silent. But the silence felt different now. Softer. My breathing slowed gradually. "I forgive you," I whispered. "For leaving without saying goodbye. I forgive you." The warmth beneath my palms began to fade again. Not abruptly. Not like something snatched away, but gently, like heat dissolving into cool night air. My tears slowed, replaced by a strange stillness spreading through my chest. "I won't trap you here," I said, my voice steadier now. "I won't make your jacket into a ghost." The wind outside quieted. The house felt less tense, less watchful. Slowly, I lifted the jacket from the hook. My fingers lingered in the sleeves one last time. Then I walked back to the chair by the window. I draped it there carefully. Not clinging. Not desperate. Just placing it down. The room felt ordinary again. Painfully ordinary. I stood there for a long time, staring at it. Waiting. Nothing moved. No footsteps. No shifting shadows. No warmth rising from the fabric. Only silence. Real silence. A sob escaped me, softer this time. Not frantic. Not panicked. Just grief. Raw and honest. I sank into the chair and pulled the jacket into my lap once more. But it felt like fabric now. Only fabric. And memory. The clock ticked steadily on the wall. Minutes passed. I didn't know how long I sat there before exhaustion overtook me completely. My body felt hollowed out, scraped clean by emotion. I leaned my head against the back of the chair and closed my eyes. "I'll be okay," I whispered, though I didn't know if it was true. "I'll miss you. But I'll be okay." The night remained still. And for the first time in 3 days, a nothing answered back. The silence did not feel watchful anymore. It felt empty. Truly empty. And somehow, that hurt more. I opened my eyes slowly, half expecting to see the jacket on the floor again, or folded neatly in some impossible place. But it remained in my lap, heavy and still. Just denim. Just stitching. Just something he had once worn without thinking twice. The clock on the wall read 3:17 a.m. Morning was still far away. I stood carefully, my joints stiff, my head aching from crying. The house felt colder now. Not the sharp, unnatural cold from before, but the ordinary kind that seeps in during the deepest hours of night. I walked to the bedroom and laid the jacket across the foot of the bed. Not draped over the chair. Not clutched to my chest. Just placed. I crawled beneath the covers and turned onto my side, facing the empty space where he used to sleep. My hand hovered over the mattress for a long moment before resting there. Cold sheets. Flat pillow. No indentation. No warmth lingering from something unseen. Only absence. My chest tightened, but the panic didn't come back. The house did not creak with suggestion. The air did not press against me with intention. It was just a house again. I stared at the ceiling until my eyes blurred. The truth settled slowly into me, not as a dramatic revelation, but as something quieter and heavier. He had not been trying to stay. He had not been trying to leave. The warmth, the footsteps, the turning handle, they had been me. My mind clawing at the edges of reality because it could not accept how abruptly a life could vanish. Because love does not understand sudden endings. Because the body expects a voice it has heard every day for years. Because silence, where there used to be laughter, feels wrong enough to break something inside you. I pressed my face into the pillow and let myself cry again. Not hysterical, not desperate. Just grief. I know you're gone. I whispered into the dark. I know. Saying it felt like swallowing glass. But I said it again. I know. The words did not summon anything. They did not echo strangely. They simply existed. And somehow, that was steadier than the hope had been. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me under. When I woke, pale morning light filled the room. The world outside had continued without permission. Cars moved down the street. A neighbor's dog barked. Somewhere, a lawnmower started. Life. Unapologetic and indifferent. For a moment, I lay still, unsure whether the night had been real or imagined. Then I saw the jacket at the foot of the bed. Exactly where I had placed it. Untouched. I sat up slowly. The ache in my chest was still there, but it felt defined now. Not chaotic. Not unraveling. Defined pain is easier to carry than confusion. I reached for the jacket and held it in my hands. It did not feel warm. It did not feel heavy. It felt like something that had belonged to someone I loved. I traced my fingers along the frayed collar. You always said, not to turn your things into a shrine. I murmured. The memory of his smile surfaced in my mind. Not the imagined version from the dark, but the real one. Slightly crooked. Always a little tired around the edges. You were right, I whispered. The words didn't feel like betrayal anymore. They felt like permission. I stood and walked to the closet. His clothes still hung there, orderly and patient. Shoes lined neatly beneath them. The scent of him faint but fading. I hesitated only a moment before sliding the jacket onto an empty hanger. My hand shook slightly as I placed it among the rest. Not hidden, not displayed. Just where it belonged. I stepped back and closed the closet door. The room felt larger afterward. Lonelier, but honest. I moved through the house slowly that morning, opening curtains, letting sunlight spill across the floors. Dust danced in the beams of light. The chair by the window looked like a chair again, not a monument. Not a waiting place. Just wood and worn cushions. In the kitchen, I picked up his ring from the counter. It had sat there for 3 days, untouched, as if moving it would rewrite reality. I held it in my palm, studying the faint scratches along the band. "You don't get to disappear," I said softly. "Not like that." But disappearing and being gone are different things. He was gone. But he had not disappeared. He existed in memories that did not flicker. In photographs tucked into drawers. In the way I still brewed coffee too strong, because that's how he liked it. In the dent on the couch cushion where he used to sit. In me. I slipped the ring onto a chain and fastened it around my neck. It rested cool against my skin. Not as an anchor. Not as a ghost. As something carried forward. I stepped outside onto the porch, breathing in the crisp morning air. The street looked ordinary. The same trees. The same cracked pavement. But I felt different standing there. Fragile. Yes, broken. Absolutely. But grounded in a way I hadn't been the night before. Grief would not leave all at once. It would linger in small ways. When I reached for my phone to text him. When I heard a car pull into the driveway, and my heart jumped before logic caught up. When I saw a jacket like his in a store window and had to look twice. But it would not rearrange furniture in the dark. It would not turn handles or press warmth into fabric. Those had been the echoes of love colliding with denial. And love, when it has nowhere to go, becomes restless. I looked back into the house through the open door. For a brief second, I almost expected to see him standing there, leaning against the wall, smiling softly. But there was only sunlight stretching across the floor. I let out a long, steady breath. "Goodbye," I said quietly. Not to the house, not to the memory, but to the waiting. The wind stirred gently around me, lifting a strand of hair across my face. I didn't mistake it for touch. I didn't turn around expecting footsteps. I just stood there, feeling the ache of loving someone who no longer walked beside me. And inside the house, in the quiet bedroom closet, his jacket hung motionless. No longer a ghost on my chair, no longer a weight in my hands. Just a reminder that once he had been here. And that once was real.